Welcome back to another episode of the Second Floor Podcast, recorded and produced by the Delaware State Senate Republican Caucus. My name is Matt Revel. I'm the Communications Director for the caucus, and today with me, I have Senator Brian Pettyjohn.
Hey there.
He is the Senate Republican Whip. He represents the 19th Senatorial District down in Georgetown and Long Neck, outskirts of Seaford.
North part of Millsboro now. The area in back of Hopkins Dairy Farm, Angola Neck area. That's some of my new area that I've picked up. And even going closer to Laurel, I've got 3/4 of a hardscrabble now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty diverse area. Right?
Very diverse district, yeah. Very diverse.
Well, look, Senator, I just want to jump right into it. It's actually probably, in the 5 years that I've worked here, probably the busiest January that I can remember.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
A lot going on.
Yeah,
a lot going on this January.
And a number of controversial topics, which, again, is quite unusual for January, particularly starting out the new General Assembly.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just, for lack of a better term, from formalities and things of that nature. But a couple topics that came up that I wanted to discuss with you, particularly the zero emission vehicle standard mandate.
Right.
I think I got that right.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so, long story short, last March of 2022, Governor Carney and Secretary of DNREC, Secretary Garvin, announced that Delaware would be adopting the zero emission vehicle standard regulations that are currently either in place. No, they are in place.
They are in place in California. Right.
Either way, adopting this language from California. Right off the bat, I mean, what was your opinion then, kind of not knowing everything that was going into it? But I think it's safe to say probably, as we've learned more, it's a little bit more egregious than what we had anticipated.
It is, yeah. And, look, whenever we hear that Delaware is going to adopt standards from another state, first question is, well, what are those standards? What does that mean? And, looking at some of the details of what they were wanting to do, pretty much banning the sale of new gas or diesel powered vehicles, really from a size of one of those large UPS trucks that goes through the neighborhood all the way down to a small compact car. That's worrisome. It's worrisome. For a number of reasons. One, this past winter, we've been seeing, reports of cars getting stranded with big snowstorms up in the upper Midwest. We're hearing of some of the trials of the new F-150 Lightning. They work great until you hook something to them, and then the range goes down significantly.
Right.
We're starting to hear some of the not so good side of the electric vehicle market. And, I've always been one that's been skeptical of a government mandate, period. So if the government's saying, look, we're not going to allow you to buy a new gasoline or a diesel, pickup truck, F-150, it's got to be electric. You've got to look and see, okay, what does that mean to our constituents? What does this mean to our economy? And we're not there yet. Now, I think they're trying to say, well, we anticipate the technology will catch up to it by that time. That's not the way it works. The government doesn't, through fiat, say, you're going to develop this technology. Sometimes it just doesn't work according to a government timeline. The technology needs to be out there, it needs to be proven, and then if the government wants to come in and drive the market toward that, that's probably a more appropriate place. I still don't like that, but I think that's a more appropriate thing to do rather than saying, here's our goal, the technology better be there. Otherwise, well, we're going to have to revisit and do something else.
And it's also worth mentioning that this isn't even through legislation.
No, it's not.
It's completely top-down executive.
It's through the executive branch, through their authority that they have within Delaware Code to regulate emissions. It's through their air quality. So, the state has two options. They can go with the California standards, or they can go with the federal standards. There's no in between. It's one or the other. So the federal standards don't have a timeline. There is no drop dead date that all the new vehicles have to be electric. That doesn't exist on the federal side right now. It may at some point in time, but it's not there. So our push is, hey, California standards, it might be aggressive for them. I think California is going to have. I mean, California. My district's diverse. California, it's a huge state. A lot of people think the cities in California, but there's just so many rural areas that are in California as well that I think there's going to be serious problems with implementing something as aggressive as this in California even.
So I wanted to, in preparing for this episode, if you will, I was wanting to pull the original press release. Let me get this date correct. March 3rd, 2022 is when this was announced. Again, the details hadn't been fully publicized, I guess, or definitely hadn't had a chance to really go through.
Nobody had really vetted it as of that point.
But I found this quote pretty interesting. This is from Governor Carney again on March 3rd, 2022. Quote, by adopting the ZEV, so zero emission vehicle regulations, Delaware drivers won't have to go out of state to find an electric vehicle to purchase. Let me just stop right there. I don't think that's the issue now.
Well, it's not the issue now. I mean, if you want an electric vehicle, you can buy an electric vehicle in Delaware. That's not a problem right now. I mean, you can have one delivered to your house if you wanted to. It's funny, look at the flip side. And, if this had gone through, if this will go through as they intend, well, no, you'll be able to get an electric vehicle in state. But if that doesn't fit your needs of your family or your business or whatever, you have to go out of state to get a gas or a diesel powered vehicle. So, again, it should be up to the consumer to decide what they want. The emissions on vehicles today are not like they used to be either. I mean, your pickup trucks, they've got so many emission control features on there now that, it's just a fraction of the emissions that it used to be back, during your carbureted engine days. So, a lot of what we're getting right now, a lot of it comes from the transportation sector. But let's start looking at what comes across from the Bay and from the western side. We're kind of at the end of that tailpipe when it comes to the prevailing winds. Winds flow generally from west to east. And we're on the East Coast, so we are getting all the pollutants from every point west of us that's coming in and impacting our air. And there are some days, especially up in Newcastle County, where we are above some of those air pollution thresholds during the summertime. But generally, we're not in horrible shape here in Delaware.
And so earlier this week, our caucus, in coordination with some of the House members, House Republican members, I should note, we started this campaign, if you will, call to action, right? Sent it out in all our newsletters, on our social media posts. By the way, and the call to action was to essentially write or call Governor Carney's office and Secretary Garvin's office. Just tell them what you think about this. Tell them that if you oppose it, especially tell them as such, because really, as we mentioned earlier in this conversation here, the legislature really doesn't have a whole lot of. Well, we don't have any say in it.
Well, we don't have say right now. I mean, we could step in and stop it. But I don't see the General Assembly with the current control, them stepping in and putting a stop to it. So it's going to be pressure to the executive branch, to Secretary Garvin, to Governor Carney, and really get these things, especially, now's important, but when they open this up for the public workshops after the draft resolutions are done, that's going to be another key time, because those emails, those communications are going to be part of the public record when it comes to, if there's ever any challenges to it, for the review that they are supposed to be taking, the taking of the public input and weighing of the opinions of the public. That's going to be the important part as well.
And last I checked, just before you came in, we're close to 20,000 impressions between the social media posts, the number of reads on our newsletters and the amount of times that they've been open and stuff. So this is definitely gaining traction. And I don't know, have you seen any correspondence in your newsletter or your email?
I've been getting a steady flow of emails saying that people don't support it. I've not got one specific email to me saying we need to do this. There's been some that said, okay, let's, we think it's a good idea, but this is too aggressive a timeline. But nobody that has said, yes, let's go with it. Let's go with the time frame that is currently proposed, and they're 100% in favor of it. I haven't gotten anything like that.
And I think it's also worth noting that if we've had in the past, and even in conversation I've had with folks, you'll hear, well, this isn't actually going to happen, right? I think precedent, history will say that, no, they're going to move forward with this, particularly the ideology, frankly, of Secretary Garvin and the top folks at DNREC, all good people, but they want to move forward.
This is part of the agenda that
Absolutely.
they have, for their plan to address, pollutants in the air. It's part of their plan. And, and again, there was a bill last year that would have pretty much given DNREC more authority over other cabinet agencies as well in what they do. That bill luckily was defeated. But, the executive branch is a co-equal branch of government to the General Assembly. In fact, there's a lot of people, and I would argue as well, that the general, you've got 3 equal branches of government, but the legislative is more equal because it directly represents the people. The executive represents the state and the state government. The judicial represents the courts, but the people are represented by the General Assembly. And when things like this happen, they come to us. We get the yelling and screaming. We get the emails saying, don't do this. But really, we have to direct that feedback to the executive branch because, in past General Assemblies, they have delegated their authority to make these rules to the departments. And now the departments have the power to do it. We can at any time pull those back. But again, what we're facing right now with the current makeup of the General Assembly, it's unlikely that a bill to advance that would go through the General Assembly.
Well, speaking of bills that did advance,
we got Senate Bill 35.
Yeah, that's what we're headed to. So every year, the General Assembly, it'll pass a bond bill. Well, you have the budget bill, grant and aid bond bill passes on or before June 30th.
Yeah.
So once the General Assembly reconvenes the following January, there's a mini bond bill. And typically it's very uncontroversial. It's just technical corrections. It might reshuffle some money from one allocation to another. Regardless, no new money spent. Like I said, non-controversial largely.
Should be. It should be non-controversial.
Except this year.
This year.
So Senate Bill 35, the mini bond bill. Why don't you explain kind of what happened? It's pretty. It can be a little hard to follow, but
it can be. Yeah. So the mini bond bill, and if you look at the title of the bill, it's an act to amend the laws of Delaware relating to the Bond and Capital Improvements Act of the State of Delaware and certain of its authorities for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. Okay. That's usually what the name of the long title of the bond bill is. And so, you've got certain things, reallocation of money for school and safety and security, minor capital improvements, procurement thresholds, community transportation funds. There was a project that I actually had that I asked to be put in there. Criminal legal system imposed debt study group, forming a study group. Department of Transportation reprogramming transfer, putting monies from one program to another. All of these things are pretty much, what you would expect. Things like the Troop 6 project, Newcastle County VOTEC athletic fields. But then you get down to section number 189, which is line 142. You got to go through 142 lines of the mini bond bill to get to section 189, which is Community Workforce Agreement, Office of Management and Budget. And then the next section that was problematic, section 190, Community Workforce Agreement, Department of Transportation. So normally, there was a bill last year to do a pilot project with community workforce agreements. In essence, this pushes certain projects. 2 out of Del Dot, I think it was 4 out of Office of Management and Budget. into a process where organized labor would have the first and foremost seat at the table to bid and to work on these projects. And it's something that we don't do in the mini bond, because with mini bond, there's real no committee hearings on them. Bond bill meets, they work on the mini bond, they put it in there, and it's usually just boom, But with these two types of things in this mini bond bill, it caused significant concern with our merit shops, with independent contractors within Delaware, non-union affiliated contractors, minority contractors here in Delaware, and their calls, their cries were pretty much ignored by the majority. There was no opportunity for them to go through a public hearing, so there was significant floor debate because of that. So the committee hearing and the floor debate kind of happened at the same time. And unfortunately, on the floor debate, you can't have people just walk up and offer their public comment, as you should be able to in an open and transparent government.
Right.
We had to call witnesses. We had to call certain witnesses that represented groups, rather than allow people who were going to be affected by this to offer direct testimony. This kind of tips the scales on some of these projects in favor of the union shops versus merit shops or independent shops, and really upsets the balance that the bidding process for state jobs, state jobs that are coming from taxpayer money, should be based completely on somebody's merit and their experience rather than union affiliation.
Well, and as you mentioned, so the particular Tuesday, I think it was the 24th, if I'm doing my math in my head correctly, I believe it was Tuesday 24th, this bill was heard in the Senate. I don't know, 150, I would say, individuals
at least, yeah,
that were representing the Latino community,
mm-hmm.
Other folks who just in general weren't members of a labor union.
Mm-hmm.
They came to us before session and said, hey, look, this is going to really hurt our business. This is really going to hurt our ability to get these jobs,
mm-hmm.
make a living. And as you mentioned, so we heard some very great and passionate testimony from some individuals. But long story short, it passed, ironically, with an amendment that we think makes the bill worse.
Mm-hmm.
Senate Amendment 2 removes, deletes, quote, and or bona fide legal citizens of the state.
Yeah.
What do you? What was our argument when that was presented?
Our argument was that removing that language would make it so that not only would these go to labor jobs, but to residents, to employees that aren't even residents of Delaware.
Right.
So instead of state taxpayer money flowing into pockets of Delawareans who are hardworking Delawareans, it could go to people that are residents of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, New York. We're in an area that's got a lot of workers in it, a lot of union workers, and unfortunately not a lot of them are in Delaware. So we were going to see that money flow out of the state to help families not from Delaware now.
But that language was initially in the bill, thus, in theory, I would say, ensuring these jobs that had it passed unamended, at least folks within the state mm-hmm. that were part of a labor union would have received the contract or work, whatever. Yeah. Now that's not guaranteed.
That's not guaranteed.
Right.
No. And look, whether or not it's union or not, these are prevailing wage jobs. Mm-hmm. So they would be paid the same whether they're a member of the union or not a member of a union. These types of jobs, the workers get paid a certain dollar wage an hour, union or not. So and they're usually pretty well paying jobs. If you ever look at the Department of Labor, what the prevailing wage rates for anything from a flagger to somebody who works on an elevator to a painter, you'll see some of those wages are pretty high. So we could have had people in Delaware that weren't member of a union that could be getting paid that wage for these state jobs, and now that's not guaranteed.
So it passes the Senate.
Yep.
Amended. Makes the bill somehow worse, but it did. Fast forward, moving along to Thursday the 26th, when this bill was slated to be heard in the House of Representatives, I would say, I don't know, this might be a conservative estimate, but at least 400 individuals, again, representing the Latino community, non-union members and such, showed up to voice their opposition to this. And there were union members there as well, quite a bit, right? Right. So the Republican caucus in the House was slated to run, I think it was three or four
amendments. I think there were.
Yeah.
Four amendments were pre-filed, I believe.
And we were under the impression, at least going into their session, that the bill didn't have the votes. What happened? Because there's like a 2-hour lull.
That's a good question. There was a long caucus where I believe the director of the Office of Management and Budget was talking to the majority caucus, and I mean, bottom line, at the end of the day, they ended up with the votes that they needed to pass the bill unamended. Yeah. Not sure what was said in their caucus.
Unamended further.
Unamended further.
Yeah, right.
Unamended further. We were hanging around because we thought that there was going to be an amendment to the mini bond that was going to be attached to the House bill, and that would have sent it back to the Senate, and we would have had to stay to cast the final vote on it in order to go on to JFC break with this being passed. But lo and behold, something happened, discussions occurred, and there were no amendments that were agreed to, and the bill passed the House of Representatives.
And signed that same night.
That's correct. Yep.
Wow.
And again, I don't have a problem with union work. My parents were members of unions. I've got a lot of friends that are members of unions, whether it's electrical, IBW, some of the other labor unions, teachers union. There's a lot of good people. The issue that I have is that when you're dealing with state money, when you're dealing with state projects, everybody should have a fair chance to bid on those, not tip the scale in favor of one group or over another. That's not what this country is built on, in terms of equal protection under the law. This is a law, and it's giving an unequal advantage to one group of individuals, one group of companies over another.
Well, I would say we keep you abreast of this situation, but it's already been signed. Yeah. Passed both chambers and signed within a week.
Yeah. And again, usually with a just a technical bill like a mini bond bill normally is, it's not a problem. It's not abnormal. But this is an abnormality, and hopefully this is not something that we're going to be expecting happen on a regular basis. Things like this that are controversial have no chance for a public hearing, get ramrodded through in a week in the General Assembly. That's not good governance.
Well, what we can keep you abreast on is the EV mandates.
Yes.
And what may come of that. Look, if you're listening or watching this on YouTube, write to Governor Carney, write to
Secretary
Garvin.
Yep.
That information's out there. I'll provide a link either in the description of this podcast or on the YouTube to look at the graphic and also to their email addresses. But winding this down, Senator, what else you got going on?
It's JFC break right now.
Yeah.
So, I've been dipping every once in a while and looking at what's going on in JFC, listening to some of the testimony from the department heads, from the cabinet agencies to see, why they're asking for the amounts that they are, kind of getting an idea of the questioning that's happening to the department. So, just really following with that. And, whenever we're not in session, it's always constituent issues. Dealing more and more with constituent issues. So that's been going on. Got my first coffee coming up next month over on the new area of my district. Think we'll have some emails and some social media posts about that. But it's
next month, March or February.
Next month, well, actually, it's this month.
Okay,
it's February now. Yeah, January went by that quick. Yeah, so this month. The third Saturday, we're going to be over at Ocean Grill. So we'll be doing the coffee over there. But, it's when people say, well, do you really do any work outside of session when you're not in session? Yeah, we do.
I've always maintained that the 6 months, when you're not in session, often you're the busiest.
We are because there's less structure. At least when we're in session, it's Monday or it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We've got session at a certain time, so that's blocked off for meetings. My calendar is usually in 10-minute blocks leading up to on a session day to that. But then when we're not in session, it's just kind of a free-for-all with anybody that wants to schedule meetings, or if there's issues, I have to go over and take a look at a tax ditch, or talk to one of our farmers about an issue that they have. It's all over the place, and with a district as big as mine, causes me to put a lot of miles on my vehicles as well.
Well, Senator, look, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come here and discuss these issues. If you want to stay in touch with Senator Pettyjohn or get updates from his newsletter, look, you can send me an email request, so I can get that out. Matthew.revel@delaware.gov, or to Senator Pettyjohn himself.
Brian.Pettyjohn with an I, Brian.Pettyjohn@delaware.gov.
Yeah. So if that's something you'd like to receive, send me a note, send us a note, we'll get you hooked up.
Sounds good.
Awesome, Senator. Well, thank you.
Appreciate it, Matt. Yep.